Hi everyone! Welcome to my second drawing tutorial on Deer Fox Studios. You might already know this, but in case you don't, I am the Ghost Leopard. In this video, I'm going to be discussing how to draw citizens like dolphins, whales, and porpoises. And I know what you're thinking. Ghost Leopard, why on earth would I need to know how to draw whales and dolphins? Well, you don't. But maybe you've had an interest in whales for a while. Or maybe you're just looking for something new and different to draw. Or maybe you're illustrating a graphic novel that includes whales and dolphins and you need tips. If any of those descriptions fit you, or you're just insanely bored, then this video is for you. First things first, science divides the citizens into 3 categories: whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Simple, right? Nope, wrong. Scientists also divide them into just 2 categories: toothed whales and baleen whales. The ones with teeth and the big whales with baleen. And then there are some species of beaked whales that don't have any teeth at all. We're just gonna throw them in with the toothed whales since they have a similar form to some of them. I think for this video, I'm gonna use the second category and divide the whales even further based on shape. I'm gonna divide the toothed whales into a category for dolphin-shaped creatures with longer beaks, beaked whales, orcas, and some of the porpoises with shorter beaks into another, and I'll have a category for narwhals, belugas, and the other porpoises with little to no beak. Oh, and there's one more category I'm gonna make for the toothed whales. I'm gonna put the sperm whale, leviathan, and basilosaurus into a separate miscellaneous category since they're shaped quite a bit differently from the others. Fused yet? Don't worry, these aren't scientific facts. Although there might be a taxonomy system similar to this, I'm mostly just dividing the whales up so I can cover more species that are drawn in similar ways. Luckily for you, the baleen whales get much simpler. Pretty much gonna split them into just 2 categories: flatter whales, like the blue, mink, and humpback whales, and the more rounded ones, like the bowhead and right whales. However, before I get into any specific species, I would like to make a few things clear. Number 1, whales don't spout water contrary to popular belief. What you see coming out of the whale's blowhole is steam and hot air, not water. Like any air-breathing creature, if a whale breathed in water and then continued to do so, it would suffocate and die. Second of all, baleen whales don't eat people. Their throats are only a few inches wide for swallowing krill. A person could never fit in there, much less an entire ship, as some movies and books say. You know that in some versions of the Bible, it says that Jonah was swallowed by a whale? However, if you research a little, you'll find that those Bibles were translated from Hebrew, which always says fish. In those times, pretty much any marine creature might have been referred to as a fish. And while it might as well have been a sperm whale or some extinct species, these guys didn't do it, unless God purposefully expanded its throat. He could have very much done that, but it again could have been any aquatic creature. We just don't know. Anyway, that was something I wanted to say, but a little off topic. Let's get back to drawing the whales. I'll start off with the dolphin-shaped creatures. This category mostly has, you guessed it, dolphins in it. You're probably thinking of the bottlenose dolphins, but there are over 38 species of dolphins, like the spinner dolphin, Atlantic spotted dolphin, common dolphin, and the exotic river dolphin. Not all of them have a beak, but I'm basically just going to start with the ones that have a really long skinny beak and work my way down to the ones with little to no beak, as I mentioned earlier. River dolphins like the Baha'i, Amazon river dolphin, and the Ganges river dolphin all have very narrow, thin snouts, sort of like this. While I'm on the topic of dolphin snouts, let's talk about teeth. Toothed whale teeth are rounded and cone-shaped like this, which makes them perfectly ideal for grabbing slippery little fish. Quite different from most land carnivores' teeth. Not all toothed whales have these teeth though. Remember the beaked whales I mentioned earlier? It's also worth noting that the river dolphins don't really have much of a dorsal fin. It's really more of a hump like this. The Baha'i and Francina dolphins do have a triangle-shaped dorsal fin. They also have paddle-shaped fins like this. You can basically just draw a curvy trapezoid with rounded edges. Probably butchering the pronunciations. Amazon and Ganges river dolphins' fins are a bit more triangle-shaped. Gray's beaked whale has a thin, slender snout too, but it curves in from the melon more than the river dolphin's beaks do. Moving on, we have the saltwater dolphins with less lengthy snouts. The most recognizable species, I believe, is probably the bottlenose dolphin, due to it being a popular selection for aquariums and marine parks. Dolphins are extremely sleek and agile, perfect for slipping through the waves, though the humpback dolphin has, well, a hump. Also something to note, some species of dolphins have somewhat of a flexible neck. Many don't though. Also, some species, like the bottlenose, have a little bit of an underbite as seen here. One more thing, most of the dolphin species have slender fins shaped like this. One thing that really bothers me is when people call the orca a whale. Technically, orcas are in a special group of the dolphin family called blackfish, which also includes pilot whales. I guess they look a little different from what you typically picture as a dolphin, being rather large and having a much shorter beak, down to the point of it hardly being seen as a beak at all. Orcas have rounded fins, like this, as well as having large vertical dorsal fins, which are typically larger and straighter in most males, and somewhat curved in females. Also, older individuals tend to curl in their tail flukes just a little bit. Just in case you didn't know this already, these white patches aren't their actual eyes. Their eyes are actually right there. The white patch is supposedly there to reduce glare from the sun, kind of like the dark streaks you might rub under your eyes to show that it's go time. Moving backwards on the beak scale a little bit, let's take a moment on the beaked whales. These dolphin-like toothed whales have slender beaks like a dolphin, but retain a more rounded melon. Many species have tusks, but like I mentioned before, some just don't have any teeth. For feeding, they just sort of suck up their food. Some beaked whales' tusks can make for some pretty bizarre and crooked-looking beaks. They also have a small dorsal fin, small paddle-shaped flippers, and almost no dip in their flukes like other whales do. Speaking of fins, let's look at the pilot whales. They have almost no beak and a very rounded shaped head. In my opinion, their body is a very interesting shape compared to most whales and dolphins. It's almost as if instead of a teardrop type shape at the front and then slowly tapering down to the tail, it just holds the width like this. Then at the tail, it just suddenly slants downwards. This is a long-finned pilot whale example, by the way. This guy also has some pretty interesting lengths to his pectoral fins. He's just a very interesting guy. Oh, also pilot whales have a hooked dorsal fin. Gotta love the pilot whales, but let's move on to the porpoises, shall we? Porpoises are shyer and smaller than most other cetaceans. They vary greatly, but for the most part, they all have rounded melons, and if they have a dorsal fin, it's usually quite triangle-shaped. Other than those differences, their spade-shaped teeth, and the fact that they don't really have much in the way of a snout, they're shaped pretty similar to a dolphin. Except for Dahl's porpoise, who looks more like a cross between the humpbacked dolphin and the pilot whale. Feluccas are quite like the porpoises, except they're a little bit more slender in shape, and they have a bit of a more flexible neck. Also, they have zero dorsal fin, they don't even have a rib, it's just completely not there. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, let's talk about narwhals. First things first, I want to go ahead and bust two myths. The tusk that spirals from the whale's head is not attached to its forehead like portrayed in so many toys and cartoons. The tusk actually comes from the whale's nose area. Second of all, it isn't actually a horn. It's a really, really long tooth. Narwhals, you see, have only two teeth. One of the teeth, or very rarely two, will grow into the magnificent tusk that earns the name Unicorn of the Sea. Make sure when drawing to make the tusk not super thick. It's pretty skinny in reality. Also, don't miss the spiraling pattern when drawing details. Remarkably, the tusk isn't even the only interesting thing about this whale. Narwhals have very mottled backs. In fact, when sailors first saw them, they thought that the narwhal was just a dead whale floating along in the water, which is why their name means corpse whale. Another thing I'd like to point out is the shape of the narwhal's tail. It basically looks like two semicircles next to each other that perhaps curve in a bit at the tips. Very fancy indeed. The largest toothed whale in the world is the sperm whale, which also has a very unique body shape. Its head takes up about a third of its body, and it's in a very square shape, complete with a very slender jaw lined with conical teeth. You probably knew this already, but sperm whales are known for diving deep into the midnight zone of the ocean and snacking on giant squids. That's why oftentimes these whales will have sucker scars embedded in their skin. They also have rather small pectoral fins, wrinkle lines along their sides, and a small bony ridge of a dorsal fin along their backs. Alongside the enormous sperm whale, you'll also find the pygmy and dwarf sperm whales. Basically, they're like the larger ones, but their heads are smaller in comparison with their bodies, and they actually have a little hooked dorsal fin. There's also the extinct Leviathan, which is supposed to have inspired the book Moby Dick. It looks like the sperm whale, but it has much larger teeth, which makes it look absolutely terrifying. Finally, the last toothed whale I'd like to talk about is the also extinct Basilosaurus. It honestly just looks to me like a really long dolphin without as much of a dorsal fin and a much less friendly face. That's how most artists depict it anyway, but I would like to say that a lot of that is theoretical, and while yes, they do have ways of calculating what an extinct creature looks like, it isn't quite perfect. Plus, look at what the sperm whale's bones look like. Would you have guessed that was a whale? Me either. Moving on from the toothed whales, we have the enormous baleen whales. There are much fewer of these than the toothed whales, but they include the largest animals on the planet. First thing you may notice right away is that not a single one of them has a large dorsal fin, if they have one at all. Look at the blue whale's dorsal fin. It's so cute and tiny. I'm actually going to start with the whales that are more rounded in shape, otherwise known as the right whales. The right whales are rounded and teardrop shaped like this, and they also have enormous mouths filled with baleen. Hang on, let's back up. What exactly is baleen? Baleen is what these whales have instead of teeth. They are long, thin plates that are basically meant to separate water from food like krill, plankton, and small fish. The right whale's mouth arches upwards like so into the kind of sad smile you see on most large whales. Their flukes are long and skinny, and their flippers are wedge-shaped. One member of this group, who isn't actually called a right whale but still classifies as one, is the bowhead whale. It has a really thick head for smashing into ice. The last group of whales I'd like to talk about is the flatter whales, otherwise known as the gray whales. This group includes the humpback, fin, sea, gray, mink, and blue whale. These whales have a flatter, more torpedo-like shape than the right whales. They're quite a bit longer too. In fact, the blue whale is believed to be the largest animal to ever exist. The fin whale is the second. These whales often have the iconic throat grooves which you see in many baleen whales. The throat grooves run horizontally along the chin and partially the belly of the whale. I'm not sure why, but for me, all the baleen whales look like they constantly have a sad or confused smile on their face. Do you see it too? Also, don't forget that a lot of large whales have barnacles all over them. Unlike the right whales, the gray whales often have a tiny, itty-bitty little dorsal fin near to the back. Also, some of them have a small bump where their blowhole is. By the way, one of the less obvious differences between whales and dolphins is that whales have 2 blowholes and dolphins only have 1. Oh, and their blowhole is not connected to their throat at all. Their respiratory and digestive systems are completely separate, unlike what is shown in some movies where you can supposedly escape through their blowhole. At this point, you're probably thinking, Ghost Leopard, this stuff is great and all, but you just gave us a bunch of tips and facts about individual species of whales and dolphins. Why can't you just give us an overall view of them? Also, why couldn't you have talked about narwhals more? To that I'd answer that, like the wings from my previous episode, each species of cetacean is unique. They have different fin and fluke shapes, different color patterns, and different weirdly shaped faces. I can't just give you an overview of all the whales because of how diverse they are, and I wanted to pinpoint a few species in case someone needed some tips on that particular species or a whale related to it. With that being said, I am going to give you some tips on just whales and dolphins in general. My favorite shape to use when drawing whales and dolphins is a teardrop shape. Maybe it's flatter on one side, maybe it's a little longer than a regular teardrop, maybe it has a little bit of a hump here. No matter where it ends up, it always starts as a teardrop shape. I think it's extremely important to keep round and gentle edges around the whale or dolphin's body because I think it just flows better with the fact that all cetacins are aquatic animals and swim as if they were a part of the ocean themselves. Just keeps things very fluid in my opinion. Another thing about their body shape is to just always keep the line of motion in mind. Whales and dolphins are perfect for this. What I like to do, especially when I'm drawing in more of a cartoon style, is to curve the line of motion depending on the creature's mood. The line curving upwards looks happy and cheerful, as if the entire creature's body is just one big smiley face. Curving downwards is just kind of hanging sadly in the water. Who stole your fish, little dolphin? Just point me in their direction. A completely straight line looks a little static, but can be used to imply focus, or if your creature is going really fast. As for the tail flukes, it's kind of like how you would go to draw a heart. You start at the point of the tail tip, draw one fluke like this, and repeat on the other side. Flukes viewed from the side can be drawn sort of like this, as can the pectoral and dorsal fins. Just think of the shapes, like triangles, trapezoids, or this weird rounded yet pointy shape. You can also show the fins drooping if your dolphin is sad. Last tip I'm going to give you is to almost always draw highlights on your whale. It makes your cetacin look more wet. If your dolphin or whale wasn't wet, then they'd have a bit of a problem. Well, that wraps up today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe to Deer Fox. I'm trying to beat Pumpkin King in how many subscribers I can get, so if you like me, please subscribe. Also, leave a comment on what drawing tutorial videos you'd like to see next. Also, say what your favorite whale, dolphin, or porpoise is in the comments. In fact, you aren't allowed to comment unless you tell us your favorite cetacean. See you guys next time. Remember, Jesus loves you. This is the Ghost Leopard signing off.